At our family reunion, my uncle announced, "Some people just aren't meant for greatness. They're just background characters in other people's lives." His eyes locked on mine as everyone burst into forced laughter. I choked down my anger. Months later, when I was given power over the family inheritance, he was the first one to come crawling, and I never forgot that moment. It started at our family reunion last summer. We were at my grandparents' old property in Franklin, Kentucky. Nothing fancy, just a big yard, picnic tables, folding chairs, and a line of crock-pots humming on a plastic table covered with foil pans of barbecue and deviled eggs. I was standing near the grill, just trying to be helpful. I'm not a loud person. Never have been. I stay in the background because I don't like drama. But some people think quiet means weak. Uncle Rick was on his third beer when he opened his mouth. He stood up, looked around, and said, loud and smug, "Some people just aren't meant for greatness. They're just background characters in other people's lives." Then he looked right at me. For a second, I thought maybe I imagined it. But no. His eyes didn't move. The grin on his face was that kind of grin that makes your stomach turn. I didn't even have time to respond. Laughter broke out around the table. Not real laughter, forced, awkward, guilty. People laughed because they didn't want to be the ones he aimed at next. My cousin Jen looked down at her plate. My mom gave me this side glance like she wanted to cry and slap someone at the same time. My older brother Mitch just kept chewing. That's how things always went. Rick had always been the loudest voice in the room, and people let him get away with it. I didn't say anything. I felt something burn behind my eyes, but I swallowed it. I nodded, gave a half smile, and walked away. I didn't need that moment to be a scene. But I didn't forget it. Not one word. Not that smirk. Not that look like I was nothing. 6 months later, everything changed. Granddad died quietly in his sleep. My mom found him early in the morning, sitting in his chair with a blanket and his old Bible open in his lap. He was 91. No suffering. Just gone. Everyone came back to Franklin for the funeral. Rick showed up in a black suit, acting like a damn politician. Shaking hands, telling old stories about working in the general store with Granddad as a kid. "He always trusted me," Rick said more than once. That pissed me off more than anything else, because I knew he barely showed up the last few years. He never visited unless it was a holiday. Never helped with bills, doctors, none of it. He was too busy managing clients, whatever that meant. But I did all of it. Every week. Grocery runs. Organizing his files. Making sure the furnace worked in the winter. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I loved the man. And Granddad saw that. One week after the funeral, we all sat in a little law office on Main Street. I remember the brown carpet. The ticking clock. The smell of old paper. Rick sat like he was already in charge. Legs crossed. Thumb tapping his chin. My Aunt Marla brought a notepad. Cousins lined the wall. The lawyer was this short guy with white hair and a blue folder. He didn't waste time. Read the will straight through. Granddad left a little something to everyone. A few thousand here and there. Some family heirlooms. A watch. A tractor. All expected stuff. Then he got to the big part. All controlling interests in family properties, businesses, accounts, and investments are to be placed under the legal stewardship of my grandson, me. Effective immediately. There was dead silence. Rick coughed. "Wait, hold on. That can't be right." The lawyer looked up, completely calm. "It's right." But he never told me. He wouldn't just hand everything to him. The lawyer lifted a thumb drive. "There's a video version. We can watch it now, or you can take my word for it." Rick went pale. I didn't say anything. My heart was pounding. I looked over at my mom. She squeezed my hand under the table and blinked real fast like she was trying not to cry. The room cleared out quickly after that. Rick didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. But when he did, I was ready. 3 weeks after the will reading, I got a text from Rick. "We need to talk. Coffee? Your call." I didn't reply right away. I let it sit for 2 days. Then I texted back. "Tomorrow. 9 a.m., Baker's on Main. That was Granddad's favorite diner. I figured if we were going to do this, we'd do it somewhere that reminded him who built this family's name. I showed up early, sat at a booth with my back to the wall, so I could see him walk in. I was halfway through my coffee when Rick stepped through the door, khakis, blazer, and that fake smile. He slid into the booth across from me, didn't order anything, just stared for a minute. Then, real calm, he said, "Look, I know things were said, and maybe I've been a little hard on you over the years." I didn't answer. He continued, "But the truth is, this whole thing's too big for one person. The properties, the taxes, the store. It's a lot. You're gonna need help." I sipped my coffee. Help? Or control? His jaw tensed. "I just don't want to see the family legacy fall apart because you're in over your head." There it was. That little jab wrapped in fake concern. I leaned in. "You mean the legacy you ignored for the last 10 years? He didn't like that. His face twitched. But I wasn't done. "You know what Granddad told me a week before he died?" He said, "The loudest one in the room is usually the one doing the least." Rick didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then he stood up, didn't say goodbye, and walked out. I finished my coffee slow. A few days later, my cousin Amanda called me, nervous. "You need to know something," she said. "Rick's been calling family members, saying the will's fake. That you manipulated Granddad." I wasn't shocked. I was just tired. I asked her who he'd spoken to. She gave me 6 names. By the end of that week, I'd gotten 3 more phone calls from relatives asking if the rumors were true. Then came the letter. It showed up in my mailbox in a cream envelope, no return address. Inside was a copy of a legal petition. Rick was suing me, contesting the will, alleging undue influence, mental incapacity, and fraud. He claimed Granddad was no longer of sound mind when the will was signed, that I pressured him and took advantage of a vulnerable elder. I stared at the paper for a long time, and then I called my lawyer. I had receipts, not just figuratively. Actual receipts, videos, recordings, texts from Granddad, notes he wrote in his own hand, emails. I had witnesses. I had everything. Rick didn't know it, but I'd been preparing for this without even realizing it. See, when you spend time with someone at the end of their life, you collect more than memories. You collect truth. I called cousin Amanda and asked her one thing. "Would you testify if this goes to court?" She didn't even pause. Absolutely. The first court date was set for March. Rick thought he could drag my name through the mud. He didn't realize the kind of quiet strength Granddad passed down to me. He called me a background character. But he was about to learn I'd been watching the whole plot unfold, and I was just getting started. The lawsuit didn't scare me, but it pulled a rotten truth out into the open. This wasn't just about money. Rick didn't want justice. He wanted control. He always had. But here's where things took a sharp turn. A week before our first court date, my lawyer called me with something strange. "Have you seen the updated appraisal on the Route 17 property?" he asked. That was the old feed supply building we inherited. It was falling apart last year, barely worth $80,000. It came in at $330,000, he said. "That's not normal unless something changed. You sure you didn't get it renovated or something?" Nope. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even been out there in months. So, I drove down to check it out myself. The second I pulled up, I knew something was off. The busted chain-link gate had been replaced. The front door had a keypad lock. There were tire tracks in the gravel and a new security camera pointing right at me. What the hell? I peeked through a side window and there it was. Shelving. Boxes. Commercial fridges. Someone had turned the place into a makeshift storage hub. I called the county office and had them pull permit records. Guess whose name was on the renovation forms? Rick. He'd forged authorization documents 2 months before Granddad died. While I was taking the old man to the doctor and making sure he had groceries, Rick was quietly renovating one of the family properties, without telling anyone. Worse, he'd signed my name on some of the forms. It wasn't just shady. It was illegal. That changed the entire game. I took everything to my lawyer. He didn't say much, just leaned back and whispered, "You're not the one on trial anymore." But I wasn't done. I needed to know what Rick had planned with that building, why he'd dumped so much cash into it. So I reached out to a friend from high school, Derek, who worked private security now. I didn't tell him much, just asked if he could check out the place at night. 2 days later, Derek called me. "You're gonna want to come see this." Inside that building, behind locked doors and hidden shelves, was a CBD packaging operation. Branded boxes, vacuum sealers, even shipping materials. And not the kind of stuff you'd sell at a local shop. This was bulk. Derek showed me a few boxes. They weren't just CBD. Some had THC over the legal limit for Kentucky. Which meant one thing: Rick was running an illegal operation on family property, and he had the nerve to sue me. So now I had a choice. I could hand this over to the police right then. Or I could hold on to it. Let him keep pressing his lawsuit. Let him lie to the judge. Let him say I faked a will while he was committing real crimes behind my back. I chose option 2. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't a punch, it's a spotlight. And Rick had no idea just how bright it was about to get. By the time the court date rolled around, Rick had dug himself in deep. His lawyer tried to play it like a heartfelt case of family confusion. Claimed Granddad was showing signs of dementia. Claimed I had isolated him from the rest of the family, influenced him unfairly, and somehow forced him to sign over everything. It was weak, but slick. Just enough drama to sound real. What they didn't know was that I'd brought backup. When Rick stood up in court, pretending to be the caring, worried nephew, Amanda sat behind me in the first row. Mitch sat beside her. So did Jen. Even Aunt Marla, who'd been quiet since the funeral, showed up. My lawyer stood and called our first witness, Dr. Langford, Granddad's doctor for the last 6 years. She was calm, clear, and deadly. No signs of cognitive decline, she said. He was sharper than most men half his age. Then we showed a video. Granddad, 1 week before he passed. Sitting in his recliner, talking directly to the camera. I know what I'm doing. I know who's earned what. I've watched this family long enough to see who steps up and who just talks. The judge leaned forward. Rick looked like he'd swallowed a thumbtack. But I still didn't bring up the building. Not yet. After court, Rick caught me outside the courthouse. "You're dragging our name through the mud," he hissed. I didn't even look at him. "I'm just telling the truth. If that burns you, maybe you lit the match." Back home, the family started to fracture. People who used to suck up to Rick stopped answering his calls. Amanda told me he showed up at her place unannounced, asking if she'd reconsider. She told him to leave or she'd call the cops. The thing is, I didn't want the family divided. But Rick had done that himself. He didn't want to share. He wanted control. And now he was losing it. 2 weeks later, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Danny. My cousin on Rick's side. He'd moved to Tennessee after a fight with his dad 5 years ago. No one knew the full story. "I heard what's going on," he said. "And I thought you should know. Rick's done this before." Done what? Tried to screw family out of land. Back in 2017, when Grandma passed, said she promised him the lot by the lake. Even got a fake signature on a document. Dad found out. That's why we stopped talking. That sealed it. Rick wasn't just a liar. He was a pattern. I finally made my move. I gave everything: building photos, permit records, THC packaging images, and the forged forms with my fake signature to my lawyer. He filed it under a counterclaim for property fraud and unauthorized business use. We submitted a motion to freeze Rick's access to any shared family assets until the case was resolved. And when the next court date came, I sat calm as Rick's face drained of color while the judge read the new charges aloud. The man who called me a background character? He was now the main act in a criminal investigation. And I hadn't even played my final card yet. When the fraud charges hit Rick, he didn't show up to the next court date. His lawyer came alone, red-faced and sweating. Said Rick was out of state dealing with a medical issue. That was a lie. He was running. How do I know? Because 3 days after that hearing, I got a call from a buddy in law enforcement, Danny's friend, actually, who'd been watching the Route 17 building under a quiet investigation. They'd opened a case once the THC packaging tip was submitted. And Rick? He was caught on a traffic cam crossing into Georgia with the back of his SUV loaded with sealed boxes from that same building. He was moving product. On camera. With time stamps. Here's where it got worse for him, not me. Remember those forged documents he submitted with my name on them? The county clerk pulled surveillance footage from the day the paperwork was filed. The man on camera?
Not me.
Not even close. Rick had paid some guy, probably under the table, to walk in and submit the documents under my name. Same clothes I wear. Same haircut. Fake ID. And that's felony territory.
Forgery. Fraud.
Transport of illegal goods across state lines. I sat in the lawyer's office with a pile of evidence in front of me. He looked at me with this half grin. You want to push for full criminal prosecution? I nodded once. Absolutely. A week later, the sheriff's office issued a formal warrant for Rick's arrest. It was like a stone dropped in a still pond, ripple after ripple. His name got leaked to local news. The family group chat blew up. People I hadn't talked to in years messaged me. Is this real? Did he really forge your name? He was always kind of shady, but this, Amanda texted me. You're doing what no one else could. You're ending it. But not everything went how I expected. 2 days after the news broke, I got a knock on my front door. It was Aunt Marla, Rick's older sister. She stood there holding a small box. Eyes red. Voice soft. I found this in Rick's storage unit. You need to see it. Inside were dozens of letters. Old letters. Most unopened. All addressed to Granddad. From me. Birthday cards. Notes from college. Even hand-drawn stuff I made as a kid. He'd stolen them. Kept them from ever being delivered. I stood there holding one card I made when I was 8. Crayon handwriting. I miss you, Grandpa. I love you. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Rick had been trying to erase me long before the will. That night, I sat on the porch with those letters stacked on my lap, shaking. He didn't just want the money. He wanted to rewrite the story. Make me disappear. Turn me into the background character he joked about. He just didn't know I don't vanish. I endure. And I remember everything. 2 months after the arrest warrant went out, they found Rick. He was hiding in a short-term rental outside of Macon, Georgia. Had shaved his beard, cut his hair, and was using a fake name, Richard Lane. Pretty close to his real name. Not smart. He was brought back to Kentucky in handcuffs. The family watched on the news as he stepped out of the sheriff's SUV in an orange jumpsuit. The same man who once looked down on me like I was a shadow behind him now had his face blurred out with the caption, "Local businessman charged in multi-count fraud and drug trafficking case." He pled not guilty. Tried to act like it was all a misunderstanding. But the case was airtight. They had video. Forged forms. Witness statements. And now, all those unopened letters. A clear sign of long-term intent to isolate me from Granddad. His lawyer tried to negotiate. Tried to say, let's settle. Drop the fraud charge if he pleads to a lesser count. But I said no. I wanted it all to come out. Every lie. Every fake signature. Every word he ever said to make me feel small. Trial lasted 5 days. I sat on the witness stand and told the truth. Told them about that moment at the reunion. The way he smirked. The way people laughed like I didn't matter. The courtroom was packed. Family, old neighbors, even the mayor's assistant showed up, because everyone knew the general store. Everyone knew Granddad. And now they'd all know who Rick really was. The jury came back in 2 hours.
Guilty.
On all counts. Rick was sentenced to 7 years. Fraud, identity theft, and unlicensed distribution. And because it was a first offense, the judge showed some mercy, but not much. After the sentencing, Rick looked at me as they let him out. His eyes weren't angry, just empty. For the first time, he looked like the background character. And me? I was finally free of the weight he tried to press on my back for decades. But this story doesn't end with some happy fairy tale. Because I've got scars too. I spent years feeling like I had to earn my place at a table that should have been mine from the start. I let people laugh at me. I swallowed words I should have said louder. I let my silence be mistaken for weakness. And yeah, I held on to revenge, maybe longer than I should have. But here's the thing, some people don't learn from kindness. They only understand consequence. And when I finally had the power to give it to them,
I didn't yell.
I didn't scream. I just let the truth do what it always does, rise. And I made damn sure it brought him down with it. Thanks for reading. I don't know what comes next. Maybe I rebuild the store. Maybe I sell the land. Maybe I just sit on this porch a little longer with a glass of tea and the ghost of my granddad beside me. But one thing I know for sure, I'm nobody's background character. Not anymore.